Hello and good morning. Thanks for tuning in to 306 in the AM. I'm your barista, preparing to serve you an early edition of morning coffee. What better way to wake up than with your first cup of freshly brewed coffee and some insightful discussions about how the new developments in technology have affected communication in the workplace? We have a great list of topics to talk about today. We'll begin with discussing how technology has brought mobility to the workplace and how we're able to do things at work and while we're at home and still be productive and stuff that we haven't been able to do 5, 10 years ago. And then we'll talk about how technology has remade the workplace and how the consumer and mobile technology has affected businesses everywhere. And we'll finish off with talking about how the necessity of adaptability is needed in today's workplace and how technology has affected that as well. So, thanks again for all those listening in. All right, we're going to start our conversation with our first guest. We have a chai latte enthusiast, Miss Danielle Tackett. Now, Danielle's going to tell us about how technology brings mobility to the workplace. And Danielle, you can go ahead and start by telling our listeners what kind of coffee we're drinking this morning.
Hi, Alan. Thanks for having me on the show today. I've got my chai latte ready, and I'm about to dive into talking about technology and how it brings mobility into the workplace. So I recently read a Forbes article about this topic, and in it said that technology, like the smartphone or email, which brings mobility, accommodates the employee's needs in consideration with family and work, and it brings a balance between those two aspects of life. So before technology, a person would have to travel in order to converse with others about ideas or business transactions. This would make it so that they would miss everything that was going on back home. But now professionals can be on a conference call with someone across the country in the morning and make it to their son's soccer game in the afternoon. This obviously benefits families because they are allowed to spend more time together, but nothing comes without a slight downside. I was also talking with Rusty, an in-house lawyer working for Apris, which is a data sharing company here in Louisville, and we got to talking about how much he uses his smartphone in his business practices. Here's what he had to say about that.
It's a sort of blessing in disguise, right? You're never really disconnected, but you're never really, so it's, which is good in the event that, I don't have to be sitting, I can also be sitting in this chair all the time, but on the other hand, it's also like you're never disconnected.
So obviously he recognizes as well that, yes, there are some benefits to having your smartphone with you and being able to use it for work, but there are some downsides. He brought up that he may get a phone call during his daughter's swim meet from work, and it would drag him away from it, but on the other hand, he wouldn't have been able to go to the swim meet in the first place. He would have had to have been at the office to do any work at all. So he may get to spend more time with his family, but is it really quality time since he's always going to be thinking in the back of his mind about work? Another interesting aspect about a new mobile work due to technology is that companies from greater distances can now converse with one another. Before technology like the smartphone or email, companies only had the resources that were available in their vicinity. But now a simple text could send vital information from halfway across the globe. In the past, corporations would spend a large chunk of their time simply gathering information that could be useful to the project they were doing, when in reality, 6 companies could have been compiling research about that same project or just research that could benefit that project. So now one email could share it with the rest of the corporations so that they could do and use their time more wisely and produce more results for the greater good of the humanity. So when you start looking into it, it's a really interesting topic that technology like smartphones and email is completely changing not only our social lives, but also our work lives as well. One small little device that can fit in our pocket is changing how everyone plays the game, and I think it'll be interesting in the future to see how that truly pans out. Alright, well, I finished my chai latte, so I guess that's my cue to be done here. Thanks again for having me on the show, Alan, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
And that was Danielle Tackett telling us how technology brings mobility to the workplace. Thanks again for joining us, Danielle. I loved how you talked about the technology and like the mobility that it brings into our lives at work. About how it accommodates the employee's needs as far as the two aspects in the employee's lives, his family and his work life, and how it brings it to a balance, so to speak, or a state of equilibrium. But you also touched about the dark side and how maybe that time that we do spend with our families away from work, and if that truly is quality time as far as when we have work always in the back of our minds. So I want to thank you for that. And for our next guest, we have Madison Doyle. Madison's going to be talking about how technology has remade the workplace. So, Madison, you can begin whenever you're ready. Tell us, what kind of coffee you're drinking this morning?
Hey, Alan. Thanks for having me on the show today. Today I'm drinking a light roast coffee, just keeping it simple. I'm excited to talk about how technology has remade the workplace. The main driver of remaking the workplace has been consumer and mobile technology. For the past few decades, most companies have had tight reins on what mobile devices and software their employees use. So, over the weekend, I interviewed Jamie Doyle, who's a private contractor for the Navy employed by Computer Science Corporation. He explained to me how most of his time working in this field, the government or his current employer controlled what kind of mobile device he used for work. So here's a clip of my interview with Jamie about technology.
Technology limits me primarily in the sense that they present somewhat of a security risk. I mean, some of the work that I do is sensitive and has some classification, and you cannot do business in a classified environment via this type of technology. That's unsecured.
Until recently, he was not provided a smartphone for work because of the risk of security breaches around sensitive information. But within the last year, his company has provided him with a smartphone for work, but he's still required to leave it in the car when in meetings regarding sensitive information. The workplace is also changing because many companies are adapting to the changing effects of technology. Many companies are completely rebuilding their business models to incorporate new technologies. According to Jamie, he sees his company as adapting to the changes. The use of mobile technologies such as video conferencing and teleconferencing has allowed him to be able to work from home. Being able to work from home saves his company money and the government money because some things can be done without travel. However, according to Jamie, the government saves on average $75,000 to $100,000 annually by him being able to work from home. Isn't that crazy? Jamie does like that his company is adapting to the changes of technology, and it makes his job easier. I also interviewed the Assistant Director of Athletics for Compliance at Bellarmine University about her use of technology in her field. Her name's Melanie Brunston. In her field, she also has to be aware of using technology when discussing sensitive information, because there are laws that prevent one from discussing specific things about student athletes, such as their GPA, over technology, such like email, because of the security risk of being hacked. Melanie also mentioned to me in our interview that Bellarmine is currently updating the system they use for the university's server, which is similar to the University of UofL's Ulink or PeopleSoft. Melanie says their system is outdated and limits her in what she can see in regards to the student athletes' profiles or accounts. So let's listen to a clip from my interview with Melanie.
Transitioning to an Elucian program, which is phenomenal. We're really excited about it, and it's going to overhaul financial aid, admissions, registrar's office. Basically, we're going to be able to be much more efficient in what we're doing.
Both Melanie and Jamie were really great subjects to interview, and I really enjoyed my time that I spent with them. So thanks for having me on the show today, Alan.
Wonderful, Madison. And that was Madison Doyle with how technology has remade the workplace. Madison, I believe it was awesome hearing how your dad, Jamie Doyle, is private contractor for the government, and how that type of privacy factor played in with him not having a smartphone to begin with. Like, that just pretty much alludes to a whole different conversation that we can have about how smartphones and how private our conversation and information on these devices really are. But that's a conversation for another day. But as far as how it's remade the workplace, how much money you're able to save, and how $75,000 to $100,000, that's a lot of money for companies. So that's a big dollar sign that most companies have to take in consideration. They're trying to incorporate these type of mobile devices, this mobile technology that, like, such as video conferences and teleconferences, and how much that really does impact us. So thanks again, Madison. We are now at the bottom of the cup of discussion, where we have Hunter Lacefield coming in to tell us about the necessity of adaptability in the workplace and how technology has affected that adaptability. So Hunter, go ahead and start with what kind of coffee we're drinking.
Thanks for having me on the show today, guys. I've got my Java Chip Frappuccino, and I'm ready to talk about the necessity of adaptability in the workplace due to technology. Technology has made adaptability a key tool for successful employees in the modern workplace. Technology has been changing or upgrading at an extreme rate, and that most workplaces are completely different than what they were 15 years ago. I interviewed Karen Lacefield, a nurse case manager at Coventry Healthcare, to tell us about how her job has changed over the past 15 years. Here's what she had to say.
We used to have to report all of our patients by handwritten notes and hand carrying them into the office. Since in 15 years now, we have to get on the internet and download forms and reports and type them and submit them electronically.
So because most workplaces are changing and evolving through technology, like Karen's, most of the employees need to have adaptability in order for them to succeed. Karen Lacefield also mentioned that her job has completely changed since first started, but most people don't understand that, like, what she had to do is always handwritten, giving it to the employee, driving all the way down there. Now it's just simple email and stuff, and you would think that would make her life easier and like more or less stressful, make her life better. But however, she says in her interview that it's causing her more stress and more work. Let's let you guys hear what she had to say.
The cell phone makes it easier, the fax machine makes it easier, and the computer makes it easier because we're able to receive things, but it's more stressful and appears to be more work than what it used to be. So I guess it's kind of 50-50. There's good and bad to it.
Thanks again, Hunter, for providing our listeners an insight on the necessity of adaptability in the workplace and how much technology affects companies and whether or not employees can stay up to date with these changes and how rapidly these technologies are beginning to grow and expand to new digital landscapes, and how companies can either keep up with these technologies and how important it is to do so as opposed to trying to catch up to the competition. So thanks again, Hunter. And alright, looks like we finished our last cup of conversation. I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in to this edition of Morning Coffee. If you have any questions about what we said today or about what we'll be talking about later, feel free to email us at morningcoffee@louisville.edu. Again, I'm the barista serving you this vital information for businesses everywhere. Tune in next week when we start to talk about how technology will look 5-10 years down the road and see whether or not it will still have the same type of impact, a bigger one, or even lesser one in that business world in the future. So again, I'm Mr. Barista. I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in to this awesome and insightful edition of Morning Coffee. Thanks again.